My name is Jennifer Thompson, and I've done my cross-gendered leisure project on golf. I chose this because it's a sport that I've never really learned anything about or had much experience with, but there are some people in my life who are avid golfers, and so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to learn a little bit more about it. So to start off talking a little bit about the history of golf, there have been some debates about where it originated. Both Roman and Chinese history have records of men hitting a ball with a stick, but for a long time the belief is that it started in Scotland in the 15th century. But the first mention of golf in the United States wasn't until 1779, and only men were really addressed as potential players of this new sport. For example, in James Rivington's Gazette in New York City, he stated, "Gentlemen may be furnished with excellent clubs," so it's really marketed towards men. But in Great Britain, the Ladies' Golf Union was formed in 1893, which was the first women's association for golfing that was formed, and their amateur championship took place that same year. The United States didn't form a golf association for women until 1944, which was the Women's Professional Golf Association, and the Ladies' Professional Golf Association that we know today was not founded until 1950. So how many women golfers are there? Well, according to Carr, in 2009, only 22 women, which were 2% of the athletes in the 1904 Olympics, competed in sports, one of which was golf, and it gained popularity in the late 1800s, so this was a time when women were still viewed as their leisure activities being in the home, and they were mothers and homemakers. Participation has increased since the founding of the LPGA, but the numbers are still statistically lower than male participants in professional golf and also in leisure golf. Only 24.2% of all golfers are women. So why is it that we still have this lower number of female golf players? It's historically been a male-dominated sport, and that's largely due to the behavior on the course. For example, women reported that they feel that they're very visible on the course and being judged for their abilities. And this is not a sport that exerts a lot of physical energy. There's not a lot of sweating that happens on the golf course, so I think that men insert their masculinity by their behaviors. And I think that as women's leisure has become more accepted, so is golf, even though we're not seeing even numbers of participation. And I think that for women, seeing professional golfers succeed has encouraged them to try the sport and participate more, despite it being a male-dominated sport. And I personally found it very interesting that female leisure golfers state that they feel women are still not really widely accepted in this sport due to the fact that there is such a lack of golf clothing for women in pro shops and other sports stores. They say it's a rack in the back, and that you really don't have a lot to choose from. Along with there not being very much female staff that's in the clubs there to help coach you, give lessons, or provide support. And they also stated that having other women to golf with was a really important factor in participation. To look at golf as a man's sport and the apprehensions that I had around it, golf fits into the traditional role of leisure for men because it gained popularity in the late 1800s when women's leisure wasn't recognized. Co-ed sports were not acceptable or heard of at this time, and women were viewed as belonging in the home, taking care of the children, and upkeeping with household activities or housework. My experience showed me that women on the course are still treated as damsels and thought of as the weaker sex, and women have reported that they've experienced statistical discrimination on the course and aren't treated as individuals for their skills. So these women reported that statistical discrimination is the fact that they are just judged based off the fact that they're women, and men are judging them on their skill set based off of their gender, as opposed to actually judging them as an individual player. I never had participated in golf before this activity because of the stigma of female golfers, just that they are, not as good players or slower players, and then just the real lack of femininity that comes along with it. I've let myself feel intimidated by that, and I've never been invited to play either, so it's not been a sport that I've seeked out on my own. Watching it on TV is boring to me. I don't think that it's a very entertaining sport to watch, so I've always looked at golf as being a little bit dull, and it also seems a little bit pretentious, kind of like a rich person's sport to me as well, so that always kind of turned me off from it or didn't give me any desire to seek it out. Going into a little more detail about the discriminations faced for women in golf, them not being accepted as golfers historically has fit in with the Victorian ideal that we've learned about, women being looked at as dainty and as the weaker sex. We're not meant to, break a sweat or lift a finger outside of the home, and we're fragile. It's also a costly leisure activity, and we learn that historically that's viewed as being for upper-class white men and sometimes upper-class women. So joining a club to participate in a sport is something that is really looked at as a little more highbrow in history. And according to some research that's been done, women actually tend to lose interest in golf. There's a very small retention rate within women golfers, and it's due to a few different factors, but one of the most confounding is due to male rituals, and they feel that masculinity is asserted on the course as a means to maintain it as a man's sport. So these rituals that the women were referring to who were studied stated that men would urinate on the course, they would be cursing, the people who work in the club, the men who work in the, at the club would not look at them in the eye or talk to them in a condescending manner. And I can relate to this in my experience because when I was at the driving range, I was one of the only 2 females on the range. Every single green was full with men, and I got a lot of looks as I was walking in and walking to my, where my tee was and everything like that. And I noticed that their stances seemed to be a little bit defensive and masculine in nature. Just another kind of fact to show the discrimination in professional golf is that according to Callist, the LPGA total tournament prize reached $43 million in 2004, while the men's PGA total winnings reached $250 million in 2005. So my experience, I was definitely a little bit intimidated going into this activity. I really didn't know what to expect. The image that you see in the middle is where you insert your money, get your balls. I didn't know how to work this, so I had to ask the guy in the shop to help me out. And I definitely felt nervous, I felt intimidated, and I let myself feel pretty anxious about it. What I learned from this is that men can take a sport that's not physically exerting as other sports and try to make it masculine just by their actions. And I can understand why these studies that show that women lose interest in the sport due to lack of fellow female players can be a really strong component. I can understand how the discrimination of women faced by men being perceived as not knowing how to play the sport, and that leisure for men seems to be more pronounced due to history, and women have to fight for their place to coincide in the same sports and be looked at as having the same abilities. Despite all of this, I would golf again, even though I did have some apprehensions and felt a little bit uncomfortable, but I did enjoy the personal challenge of trying to have a good swing and perfecting your stance and all of that. I can understand how this can be sort of a relaxing and stress-relieving sport. So I would say I would do it again. It was very interesting to do this research and look at the discriminations that women have faced within golf and how men, again, can take a sport that's not physically exerting and make it masculine just based off of the way that they talk and how they act.